The fourth year entangled with Ethan Lawson. My family went bankrupt. His beloved white moonlight took the opportunity to say, "It's time for her to suffer a little hardship. Let her weak nature be washed away." Ethan Lawson heard those words and, without hesitation, sent me abroad. 4 months later, I returned to New York with scars, both seen and unseen. Everyone thought I would continue to cling to Ethan, that I wouldn't let go. But I did. I actively avoided him. I returned his gifts. I completely drew a clear line between us. Ethan laughed with his friends. Finally threw away this useless burden. But on the day I left New York, he seemed lost in thought. He chased me all the way to the airport, his voice trembling as he begged, "If you stay, can we still be the same as before?" I curved my lips into a smile and pointed at my slightly bulging belly. "Ethan, do you think we can ever go back to the way we were before?" Emily Carter had been the darling of high society, the only daughter of the powerful Carter family. She had grown up with the best of everything: wealth, prestige, and the security of knowing she would always be protected. And she had loved Ethan Lawson, deeply, blindly. For 4 years, he had been the center of her world. Their love had seemed unshakable, a fairy tale that would last forever. But overnight, her world collapsed. The Carter Corporation was declared bankrupt, its assets frozen due to a carefully orchestrated financial attack. Her father, once one of the most respected businessmen in the country, was ruined. Reporters hounded their family, once loyal friends turned their backs, and the luxurious life she had always known vanished in an instant. Desperate and terrified, Emily turned to Ethan. He was her last hope. She arrived at his penthouse, her hands trembling as she rang the doorbell. The door opened, revealing Ethan standing tall in his crisp designer suit, his expression unreadable. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely holding together. "You heard what happened, right? My family, we lost everything." He nodded, his face remained impassive. She swallowed, forcing a hopeful smile. "I don't know what to do. Everything happened so fast, I need you." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. But it wasn't concern, it was irritation. "This is a chance for you to grow up, Emily," he said smoothly, his voice as cold as the New York winter. She felt as if the floor had been ripped out from under her. "What?" she choked out. "You've lived your whole life in luxury," Ethan continued, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Maybe now you'll finally learn what it's like to stand on your own 2 feet. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest. "Ethan, I don't understand. You said you loved me. You said we'd always be together." "That was before," he interrupted. Before she was penniless, before she was no longer a Carter, before she became a burden." Her breath caught in her throat. Ethan sighed, almost as if he pitied her. "Emily, let's not drag this out. You're not the same person anymore, and honestly, I don't think we should see each other anymore." The words slammed into her like a freight train. She searched his face for any sign of regret, any trace of the man she had loved, but all she saw was indifference. A bitter laugh bubbled in her throat. "So that's it? Now that I'm broke, you're done with me?" Ethan didn't even flinch. "I think it's for the best." At that moment, a familiar voice rang out behind her. "Someone like you is no longer worthy of my son." Emily turned, her blood running cold. Elizabeth Lawson, Ethan's mother, stood in the doorway, her face calm but her eyes filled with disgust. She had never liked Emily, even when she had been a Carter. But now she could finally say what she had always thought. "You should leave," Elizabeth said smoothly. "Holding on to Ethan won't change anything. Your place in this world no longer exists." Emily felt something inside her break. Her father, ruined, her mother fled, her friends, gone. And the man she had given 4 years of her life to? He had just discarded her like trash. Her world had crumbled, and she had nowhere left to go. The decision was not hers to make. Ethan Lawson had always been decisive, and once he made up his mind, there was no room for negotiation. Under pressure from his family, his mother, and the judgmental whispers of New York's elite, he arranged for Emily Carter to be sent abroad. There was no farewell, no gentle words of parting, just a one-way ticket, a brief email from his assistant confirming her flight details, and the chilling realization that she was truly alone in this world. The city she landed in was unfamiliar. The people, the language, the culture, everything was foreign. The first few weeks were brutal. Emily had never worked a day in her life before this. She had never had to worry about rent, food, or survival. But now, with no support system, she was forced to adapt. She took whatever job she could find. In the mornings, she worked in a dingy diner, scrubbing greasy plates and wiping down counters while customers treated her like she was invisible. In the afternoons, she took on a second job at a small convenience store, standing for hours behind the counter, ringing up purchases while dealing with impatient customers who barely glanced at her. At night, she collapsed onto a thin mattress in a cramped, shared apartment with peeling paint and flickering fluorescent lights. She barely had enough money to eat. The rich, spoiled heiress of the Carter family was gone. In her place was a woman who knew hunger, exhaustion, and the bitterness of being discarded. There were moments of deep humiliation, like the time when she had to endure a manager's sneering look as he counted out her meager pay, saying, "You don't look like you belong here. What's a girl like you doing in a place like this?" Or when she overheard co-workers gossiping behind her back, whispering about how she must have fallen from grace, how she was just another rich girl who lost everything. But she gritted her teeth and endured. She learned how to budget every penny, how to navigate the city's transport system, how to read people's intentions from a single glance. She no longer cried at night. She no longer hoped for someone to save her. The Emily Carter who had once clung to Ethan Lawson was dead. In her place was a woman who would never, ever let herself be weak again. 4 months later, she stood at the airport, her one bag slung over her shoulder, staring at the boarding gate that would take her back to New York. She had saved enough for the ticket. She had done it all on her own. Emily Carter was no longer returning as a desperate woman begging for a second chance. She was returning as someone new, someone who no longer needed Ethan Lawson. Someone who would make every single person who had abandoned her regret it. 4 months later, the plane touched down at JFK International Airport, but Emily Carter did not rush out like the other passengers. She sat still, staring out the window at the city's skyline. New York. 4 months ago, she had been forced out of this city like a disgrace. Now she was back. Not as the same Emily Carter who had once been naive, dependent, and blinded by love. That version of her was gone. A black sedan was already waiting for her outside the airport. Ethan Lawson's assistant had been sent to pick her up. Emily didn't refuse the ride. She sat in the back seat in silence, watching the city pass by. It felt both familiar and foreign. Everything looked the same. Bustling streets, towering skyscrapers, glittering billboards. But she knew that she was no longer the same girl who had left months ago. When the car stopped in front of an exclusive members-only club, she stepped out, straightened her coat, and walked inside. The atmosphere was lively, filled with laughter and conversation. High society elites gathered around tables, sipping expensive whiskey and discussing business deals. As she approached, she heard his voice. Now that the Carter family is bankrupt, she's no longer the spoiled princess she used to be. A soft, melodic laugh followed. Exactly. Maybe this was good for her. It toughened her up a little. Emily paused at the entrance of the private lounge. She knew that voice. Ethan Lawson. And beside him, Grace Whitmore, the woman who had always lingered in the background of their relationship, pretending to be nothing more than a friend. Emily stepped inside. The laughter died instantly. Every pair of eyes turned toward her. Shock. Disbelief. 4 months ago, she had been a radiant socialite, dressed in luxury, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who had never known hardship. Today, she was different. Thinner. Paler. Her delicate hands bore faint scars from months of labor. But her eyes, those same eyes that had once looked at Ethan with adoration, were now cold and unreadable. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, Grace recovered first. She put on a bright smile. "Emily, you're back. Come sit with us." "I'm not staying," Emily interrupted. Her voice was calm, controlled. She turned to Ethan. "I came to return something." From the pocket of her coat, she pulled out a small box and placed it on the table. Ethan stared at it. It was the necklace he had given her on her birthday, the only gift of his she had ever truly cherished. For years she had treasured it, wearing it only on special occasions. Now she was giving it back. Ethan's jaw tensed, but he said nothing. Emily took a step back, looking at him one last time. "I don't need it anymore." Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. The night of the gala, Emily hadn't planned on attending, but fate had other ideas. She arrived at the grand ballroom, dressed in an elegant black gown. Heads turned as she walked in, whispers following in her wake. The last time anyone had seen her, she had been a fallen heiress, exiled and humiliated. Now she radiated an aura of quiet strength, as if nothing could touch her. And then, Ethan. He stood by the bar, his gaze locking onto her the moment she entered. For a brief second, surprise flickered across his face. Then he smirked. "Finally decided to move on?" Emily met his gaze, her expression unreadable. Ethan didn't realize, at that moment, he had already been erased from her life. Forever. The lavish parties, the designer dresses, and the luxurious lifestyle. Emily Carter had left all of that behind. Now she stood in front of a towering glass building, her resume clutched tightly in her hands. This was Lawrence & Co., one of the most prestigious corporations in New York. She had once walked past this building without a second glance, believing she would never need to work a day in her life. But things had changed. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The position she applied for was entry-level, far beneath what she had once been accustomed to. The HR manager skimmed through her resume, raising an eyebrow. "You have no prior work experience?" Emily met her gaze steadily. "I'm willing to start from the bottom." The woman tapped her pen against the desk. "A former heiress of the Carter family. Are you sure you can handle this?" Emily didn't flinch. "I've already lost everything once," she said calmly. "I know how to survive." A pause. Then, "You start on Monday." Her first day was grueling. She was assigned to the administration department, handling tedious paperwork, scheduling meetings, and running errands for senior executives. She worked tirelessly, staying late to organize files, triple-checking reports, and learning every aspect of the business. There were whispers among her colleagues. "That's Emily Carter, isn't it? I heard she used to date Ethan Lawson. She probably won't last a month here." But Emily ignored them all. She wasn't here to prove anything to anyone but herself. Weeks turned into months. She became indispensable. Supervisors started to notice her efficiency. When an urgent presentation needed last-minute corrections, Emily was the one who fixed it flawlessly. When a senior manager's assistant fell sick before an important meeting, Emily stepped in and handled everything with precision. Slowly but surely, she earned respect. No longer was she just the fallen heiress. She was Emily Carter, the rising star. One day, an unexpected announcement shook the office. A high-profile merger deal was being negotiated, and top executives from multiple companies would be meeting at the Lawrence & Co. headquarters. As one of the most trusted employees in the administration department, Emily was asked to assist with the arrangements. She reviewed the guest list carefully, and then her fingers froze. Ethan Lawson. The day of the meeting arrived. Emily stood at the entrance of the conference room, clipboard in hand, her face calm and unreadable. Then, the doors opened, and he walked in. Ethan Lawson, looking as polished and confident as ever. His eyes flicked over the room, then stopped on her. For a split second, shock flashed across his face. Then he smirked. "Emily Carter," he said smoothly. "Didn't expect to see you here." Emily met his gaze without hesitation. "I work here," she said simply. Ethan chuckled. "So you finally decided to stop playing around and get a real job?" Once, his words would have hurt her. Once, she would have searched his face for any sign of warmth, of affection. But now she felt nothing. She smiled, calm, poised. "I stopped playing around a long time ago, Ethan." And with that, she turned away, her heart steady, her confidence unshaken. For the first time since their breakup, Emily Carter was no longer standing in his shadow. She was standing on equal ground. It started as a whisper. At first, it was just an idle remark at a high society luncheon, a casual observation here, a knowing glance there. "Have you noticed? Emily Carter looks different. She's been avoiding alcohol at events lately. And have you seen the way she touches her stomach sometimes?" The rumors spread like wildfire. Emily Carter, once the darling of New York's elite, then the disgraced heiress forced to rebuild her life, was suspected of being pregnant. And if that was true, there was only one possible father. Ethan Lawson had never been the kind of man to concern himself with gossip. But when his assistant hesitantly mentioned the latest circulating rumors, something inside him twisted. Emily, pregnant. His first instinct was to dismiss it. Impossible. But then, what if it wasn't? For the first time in months, Ethan found himself obsessed with something he couldn't control. He began noticing things he had previously ignored. Emily had stopped attending certain parties. She avoided alcohol. And when he looked closer, he saw it. The way her dresses fit a little differently. The subtle way she rested a hand on her stomach when she thought no one was watching. And worst of all, she had never denied it. It happened at a corporate gala. Emily was walking through the crowd, poised and radiant, her presence commanding the room. Ethan had been watching her from across the hall, his jaw tight with frustration. When she stepped outside onto the balcony for some air, he followed. "Emily." She turned at the sound of his voice. There was something different in his expression tonight, something intense, almost desperate. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, "Is it true?" Her eyes flickered, but she didn't answer. Ethan stepped closer. His voice dropped, low and urgent. "Are you carrying my child?" Emily tilted her head, studying him. Then she smiled, a slow, knowing smile, one that sent a shiver down his spine. "Does it matter?" she asked softly. Ethan's fists clenched. "Of course it matters." But Emily simply turned back toward the city skyline, her gaze unreadable. "If you're so curious," she said lightly, "you're free to investigate. You always did enjoy digging up secrets, didn't you?" Her words were like a slap. Ethan realized she wasn't going to give him an answer. Not because she couldn't, but because she chose not to. From that moment on, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about it. The doubt, the uncertainty, it consumed him. He found himself watching her more closely. Every glance, every movement, every carefully measured step she took. One evening, at an industry networking event, he spotted her across the room, speaking with another businessman. She laughed at something the man said, her hand casually resting on her stomach. The sight of it sent a rush of jealousy and frustration through Ethan's veins. That night, he barely slept. The thought haunted him. Was she carrying his child? And if she was, why was she keeping it from him? It happened at the most unexpected moment. Ethan had stopped by a high-end restaurant for a late-night meeting. As he passed through the dimly lit lounge area, his eyes landed on a familiar figure. Emily. She was seated in a private booth near the window, seemingly lost in thought. And then, he saw it. In the soft glow of the candlelight, Emily gently cradled her stomach. Her expression was one he had never seen before, soft, peaceful, almost loving. Something inside Ethan shattered. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because in that moment, he knew she was pregnant, and she had no intention of telling him. Ethan found her 2 days later. This time, there were no fancy galas, no business meetings, just the two of them, in a quiet corner of the city. "I saw you." His voice was rough, strained. "At the restaurant. I saw the way you—" Emily remained expressionless. Ethan exhaled sharply. "Why didn't you tell me?" For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. "Tell you what, Ethan?" His temper flared. "That you're having my child." A long silence stretched between them. Then, finally, Emily sighed. She placed a hand on her stomach once more, her fingers barely brushing against the fabric of her dress. "I never confirmed that, Ethan." His hands clenched into fists. "You never denied it either." She gave him the smallest, most infuriating smile. "Exactly." And with that, she walked away, leaving Ethan standing there, drowning in his own torment. Ethan Lawson had always believed that some things in life were constant. Wealth, power, influence, and for a long time, he had believed that Emily Carter's love was one of them. He had thought that no matter what happened, no matter how far she strayed, she would always find her way back to him. But now, she was gone, and he couldn't stop thinking about her. It started with small things. A fragrance in the air that reminded him of her perfume. A half-finished cup of coffee on a conference table that made him recall the way she always used to take hers. One sugar, no cream. A glimpse of dark hair in a crowded street that made his heart skip a beat, only for him to realize it wasn't her. At first, he told himself it was temporary, that this feeling of unease, of restlessness would pass. But the more he tried to push it away, the more it consumed him. Nights became unbearable. His mind replayed memories like an endless film reel. Emily laughing in his penthouse, her eyes lighting up as she told him about her day. The way she used to lean against his shoulder when she was tired, her presence a warmth he had never truly appreciated. The way she had looked at him the last time they spoke, her eyes cold, unreadable, as if he were nothing but a stranger. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt loss. And he didn't know how to make it stop. He started drinking more than usual. At first, it was just a glass of whiskey after work. Then it became 2, 3. Then one night, he found himself standing outside her apartment. The realization hit him like a slap. What the hell was he doing? But before he could turn away, the door opened. And there she was. Emily. She was dressed in a simple silk robe, her hair slightly damp as if she had just taken a shower. Her face was calm, but when she saw him, something flickered in her eyes. Surprise? Annoyance? Not once did he see longing. Ethan's throat felt dry. "Emily?" She didn't invite him in. "What do you want, Ethan?" Her voice was cool, polite, too polite, like he was nothing more than an inconvenience. Ethan swallowed hard. He hadn't prepared for this. Hadn't planned what to say. He had just followed an impulse. His voice faltered. "I wanted to see you." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, finally she spoke. "Ethan, I don't love you anymore." Ethan felt the words like a physical blow, his hands clenched at his sides. "You don't mean that." Emily sighed. She didn't look sad, didn't look angry. She just looked done. "I do." Her voice was final. Ethan stepped forward, desperation clawing at his chest. "Emily, There is no we, Ethan." Silence stretched between them. Then she did something that shattered him completely. She smiled a small, sad smile, one that held no trace of the girl who had once worshipped him. "Goodbye, Ethan." And with that, she closed the door. Ethan stood there for what felt like hours. The weight of her words pressed down on him, suffocating. He had lost her, and for the first time in his life, he couldn't fix it. Emily Carter had made up her mind. The past was dead, and the future, it was waiting for her. Far from New York, far from Ethan Lawson, far from everything that had once defined her. The job offer had come unexpectedly, a prestigious position at one of the leading financial firms in Los Angeles. It was an opportunity most people would kill for. For Emily, it was more than that. It was a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the pain, the betrayals, the endless cycle of regret. And this time, she wasn't looking back. Packing her things didn't take long. She had nothing tying her to the city anymore. Gone were the designer dresses, the expensive jewelry, the lavish lifestyle she had once taken for granted. Now she owned only the essentials: clothes, a few personal belongings, and the resilience she had built from the ground up. Her flight was scheduled for the next morning. By this time tomorrow, she would be gone. For good. Ethan hadn't seen Emily in weeks. Not since the night she had looked him in the eye and told him, "Ethan, I don't love you anymore." But even now, her words haunted him. He had tried to drown them out, tried to convince himself that she didn't mean it. But the truth was unavoidable. She was gone. And then, he heard the news. Emily Carter was leaving New York, and this time she wasn't coming back. Panic seized him. He had to stop her. He had to. Ethan's car sped through the city streets, weaving between traffic, his heart pounding in his chest. By the time he reached JFK International Airport, the departure board confirmed his worst fear. Los Angeles, 9:45 a.m., on time. She was already there. Ethan sprinted through the terminal, scanning the crowds, desperation clawing at him. Then, he saw her. Emily stood near the gate, her suitcase beside her, her posture relaxed, her expression unreadable. She looked at peace. Ethan's throat tightened. For the first time, he felt like the one being left behind. He forced himself forward, stopping just a few feet away from her. "Emily." She turned, her gaze meeting his. There was no anger, no hatred, just distance. A kind of finality he had never expected. Ethan swallowed hard. "Don't go." Emily exhaled softly, shaking her head. "You don't get to ask that, Ethan." His hands clenched at his sides. "We can fix this." A sad smile touched her lips. "There's nothing to fix." The final boarding call echoed overhead. Passengers began moving toward the gate. Emily reached for her suitcase. Ethan's chest tightened. This was it. "Emily." She paused. For a moment, he thought she might turn back, might give him another chance, but then she simply smiled. "Goodbye, Ethan." And then she was gone. Ethan stood there, frozen as the gates closed. As her plane took off, disappearing into the sky, for the first time in his life, he had lost something he could never get back. And this time, it was too late. Los Angeles was nothing like New York. The air was different, warmer, less suffocating. The people moved at a different pace, more relaxed, less concerned with power games and status. For Emily Carter, it was exactly what she needed. She had left New York behind the past, the heartbreak, and the ghost of Ethan Lawson. Now, she was here to start over. And this time, she wouldn't let anything or anyone define her future. Landing a high-level job at Westwood Capital had been no small feat. It was one of the most prestigious financial firms on the West Coast. The competition had been fierce, but Emily had walked into that interview with a clarity of purpose she had never possessed before. She no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. She simply knew her worth. And so, when she was offered a senior analyst position with an impressive salary package, she accepted without hesitation. The first few months were grueling. Late nights, endless meetings, navigating the corporate politics of a new company. But she thrived. She worked harder than anyone else. She mastered every detail, learned every strategy, and soon became an irreplaceable asset to the company. By the end of her first year, her name was whispered with admiration in boardrooms. Emily Carter was no longer just the fallen heiress. She was a force to be reckoned with. When Emily had first discovered her pregnancy, she had been overwhelmed with fear. Raising a child alone, in a city where she had no family, no support system, it had felt impossible. But as the months passed, as she felt the small kicks inside her belly, something inside her changed. She no longer saw her child as a burden. She saw them as her greatest blessing. On a quiet autumn morning, after hours of labor, her baby was born, a son. She held him close, his tiny fingers curling around hers, and in that moment, she knew she had never been stronger. There were nights when the past crept in, when she would hear Ethan's voice in her dreams, whispering words she had once believed. But when she woke up, She would turn to the crib beside her, see her son sleeping peacefully, and realize she had no regrets. The struggles, the pain, the betrayal, they had forged her into something unbreakable. Emily Carter was no longer a woman defined by her past. She was a woman who had built her own future, and she would never let anyone take that away from her. New York hadn't changed much. The city still pulsed with life, its skyline just as imposing, its streets just as chaotic. But Emily Carter had changed. She wasn't the same woman who had left years ago, broken, betrayed, and lost. Now she returned as the CEO of Carter Enterprises, the very company her family had lost in the past. She had rebuilt it from the ground up, and this time, no one could take it from her. Her name was no longer whispered in pity. It was spoken with respect. The invitation had arrived weeks ago, a charity gala, one attended by the most powerful business figures in the country. Emily didn't particularly care for social events, but this one was different. This was her debut, the first time she would step back into New York's high society as an equal. She arrived at the venue with effortless grace, her black silk gown hugging her frame perfectly. Heads turned as she walked in. Whispers followed. "Is that Emily Carter? I heard she's the CEO of Carter Enterprises now. Didn't she used to date Ethan Lawson?" The mention of his name barely registered in her mind. She had moved on. Or so she thought, until she saw him. Ethan Lawson stood near the bar, dressed in a tailored black suit, a glass of whiskey in hand. He looked almost exactly the same. Yet, not quite. His once confident, piercing gaze now carried something heavier. Regret. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Emily didn't flinch. She didn't waver. She simply walked past him, as if he were just another guest at the event. But Ethan? He couldn't look away. "Emily." She halted at the sound of his voice. Slowly, she turned, meeting his gaze with complete indifference. For a second, he seemed unsure, like he was searching for the right words. But what could he possibly say? That he regretted letting her go? That he missed her? That he still thought about her even after all these years? Instead, all that came out was a strained, almost desperate, "You're back." Emily smiled, a small, knowing smile. "We're nothing but the past, Ethan." And with that, she walked away, leaving him standing there drowning in the weight of what could have been. Ethan had always believed that he was the one who controlled the narrative. That he was the one people chased, the one no woman ever truly moved on from. But tonight, he was the one left behind. Watching as Emily Carter walked away without even a glance back. For the first time in his life, Ethan Lawson knew what true loss felt like. And the worst part? There was nothing he could do about it. The morning sun bathed the streets of New York in a golden glow. Emily Carter walked calmly, her heels clicking against the pavement, her pace steady, confident. But today she wasn't alone. A small hand nestled in hers, warm and familiar. Her son, Daniel Carter, walked beside her, his bright eyes taking in the world with curiosity. Years ago, she had left this city with nothing. Now she returned with everything she had ever needed. She had no resentment, no regrets. No lingering pain, only peace. As they crossed the street, Emily felt it, a gaze lingering on her. She didn't need to look to know who it was, but she did. And there he stood, Ethan Lawson. He was dressed in a tailored suit, the very picture of wealth and power. To an outsider, he looked unchanged. But Emily saw it, the weight in his eyes, the remorse that clung to him like a shadow. Their eyes met. For a moment, time stood still. Ethan took a hesitant step forward. "Emily?" His voice was rough, strained, like a man who had too many things to say but no idea how to say them. Emily didn't stop walking. She didn't need closure. She had already found it within herself, but as she passed him, she offered him a small, knowing smile. "We're nothing but the past, Ethan. No bitterness, no anger, just truth." Then, without another glance back, she walked forward, toward her future. And for the first time, Ethan knew what true loss felt like. As Emily and Daniel continued down the street, the little boy tugged at her hand. Mommy, who was that man? She looked down at her son, her heart swelling with love. No one important, she said gently. Just someone I used to know. Daniel nodded, already distracted by something else in the distance, and as Emily walked into the sunlight, she knew her story was just beginning.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss any future content.